Do you also associate crispy chicken wings with the image of a kind uncle with the glasses and a beard? It's not just anyone but Colonel Sanders, who became a millionaire when he was 70 years old. Before that, he lived in poverty, finished only 6 grades, and ran away from home at 13. Worked as a fireman, lawyer, fought in court, and was involved in a shootout with competitors. He is a colonel, it is a fact. And how he got rich in his old age? What is the secret of the chicken recipe? And why the creator of KFC sued KFC itself? Let's deep dive into his story. Harlan Sanders was born in the United States in 1980 to farmers Wilbur David and Margaret Ann. He was the eldest of 3 children and grew up on a farm outside of Henryville, Indiana. Sanders' father, Wilbur, died of the illness very early when he was only 29 years old. Sanders' mother, Margaret, was left penniless and extreme poverty, and to take care of her children, she took orders for self-made clothes for some time. But there was not enough money for anything, and she went to the city, where she got a job at a cannery peeling tomatoes. All week she was forced to work and live with her brother, while 3 small children were left on their own and were waiting for her to return home. She could only see them on the weekends. Sanders, as the eldest son, already at the age of 5, had to take care of the younger children. When he was 7 years old, his mother taught him how to cook. So when she was away, Sanders did a good job in the kitchen and looked after their house, his brother and his sister. Sanders knew that his mother couldn't cope alone, so he decided to help, and at the age of 10, he asked for a job with a neighboring farmer, who promised to pay him $2 a month. Although he was only 10, Sanders could already work with an axe and a saw. But the thing is, he was constantly distracted, staring at animals, squirrels, and birds. Not surprisingly, he was fired at the end of his first month. He went home, gave his mother $2, and told her what had happened. Margaret scolded him for this story, as she truly counted on him. And Sanders decided that if he ever would find a job again, he would devote enough time to it and perform as many tasks as needed to keep his employer satisfied. 2 years later, his mother decided that getting married for a second time would be a good idea. She hoped that it could help lift the family out of poverty. Margaret remarried, but unfortunately her chosen one turned out to be an extremely cruel person. He never accepted her 3 children and made it clear to her that he didn't need them at all. So relations with Sanders' stepfather didn't work out, and as soon as Sanders turned 13, he packed a small bag and left his home. In fact, he wanted to finish his studies at school somehow, so he got a job as a laborer and a lumberjack on a farm in Greenwood with a salary of $10 to $15 and room to live in. He also milked the cows and fed the cattle before and after school. Just imagine working like this all day long at 13 years old. Of course, studying was difficult for Sanders, and when he was transferred to the 7th grade, he was already so far behind his classmates that he couldn't understand what the math teacher was talking about. As a result, at the age of 16, after finishing the 6th grade, he quit school and moved to New Albany, where, thanks to his uncle, he got a job as a conductor in a streetcar company. But he only worked there for a couple of months, and all because Sanders looked older than he actually was. And one night, a guy got on his drum and asked if he wanted to volunteer for the army and go to Cuba. He also said that he would be well paid for the service there. Money was always needed, so Sanders, without hesitation, forged his date of birth, volunteered, and at the age of 16, he entered the service. A while later, a commanding officer in Cuba discovered his new recruit was just 16 years old. He discharged the boy and put him on a boat back to the States. Sanders moved to Sheffield. Sanders really wanted to get a job on the railroad, because the profession of a railroad engineer was the ultimate dream for all young people of that time. Now the prestige of this job can be compared with the work of a jet pilot or an astronaut. Like many others, Sanders was looking for a place to live and a job with a future in mind. He soon got a job at the Southern Railway as an assistant to a blacksmith, and then at the Northern Railway as a locomotive cleaner, after which he worked as a fireman for another 3 years. What an amazing job shifter he was, right? In 1909, Sanders met Josephine King, and they married the same year. A year later, their first daughter was born, and soon they had 2 more children. Even having a family, Sanders still was very inconsistent with his job. Actually, he even studied law. By the way, he practiced law for 3 years, dreaming of becoming a human rights activist. But his legal career ended after Sanders initiated courtroom brawl with his own client, and he ended up losing his job. after which he returned to his mother's house and again got a job at the railroad. His wife was tired of his activities and moved with children to live with her parents. In 1916, Sanders, at the age of 26, got a job as an insurance salesman, where he was still arguing with colleagues and management and was therefore fired for insubordination very soon. In general, Sanders often faced career failures mainly due to his stubbornness, lack of self-control, or diplomacy. At the age of 30, Sanders was still looking for his perfect career path and bought a boat and founded a small ferry company to cross the Ohio River. His enthusiasm lasted for 2 years, after which he got a job as a secretary at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. But since he was not very good with numbers, he worked there for less than a year, and he embarked on another adventure. He cashed out shares of his ferry company for $22,000 and spent all the money on the creation of a company for the production of acetylene lamps. This was not the best investment because at the same time, Delco introduced its electric lamp to the market. Sanders' venture failed miserably. Sanders moved to Winchester, Kentucky, where he began working as a salesman for Michelin tires. But already in 1924, when Sanders was 34, Michelin closed its plant in New Jersey, and Sanders again lost his job. And in the same year, he accidentally met the general manager of Standard Oil, who suggested that he open a service station in Nicholasville. So 6 years passed. The time of the Great Depression came in 1930, and the station closed down. 40-year-old Sanders was again left with nothing. But fortunately, it was at this time that an offer turned up for him that influenced the creation of the world-famous KFC chicken, and this is how it happened. In 1930, Shell offered Sanders a free lease on their Northern Corbin service station in exchange for a percentage of the company's sales. Sanders found this offer tempting and set to work. Cars passing by often dropped and pump up tires or change oil, and while they waited, they wandered around idle. Sanders thought that it would be great to surprise customers with quick meals and earn some extra money. It was here that he first invited travelers to taste the dishes he learned as a child: fried chicken, steaks, and country ham. After 4 years of serving at his own dining table, Sanders bought a large gas station across the road and expanded his diner to 6 tables. Thanks to this cafe, its gas station and service station have gained popularity among travelers. This was noted even by the governor. And in 1936, on his behalf, Sanders was awarded the honorary title of Colonel of Kentucky. So Sanders did not become a colonel for military merit. This status was granted to him for special services to the city and state. In 1937, he expanded his restaurant to 142 seats and added a motel, naming it Sanders Court and Cafe. It was also during the period that Sanders was involved in a shootout with Matt Stewart, his local competitor, who constantly painted over the signs on the motorway to prevent customers from finding Sanders' gas station and cafe. Sanders was enraged and asked the Shell employee, whose station he used to rent, to go with a scoundrel to sort it out. But he didn't expect the reaction of Matt, who pulled out a gun and started shooting. Sanders shot back and even wounded Matt. In the end, Matt shot the Shell employee. He was convicted of murder, while Sanders was acquitted because it was proven that he shot his competitor in self-defense. But back to the Colonel's divine chicken. Sanders was not happy with the 35 minutes it took to cook chicken in an iron pan of that time, but he didn't want to fry it in boiling oil either. This, in his opinion, reduced the taste of the dish. He wanted to achieve the impossible from chicken, to be cooked fast, juicy, and tasty. The first commercial pressure cookers, primarily for steaming vegetables, didn't hit the US market until 1939. Sanders bought one and modified it slightly to fry his chicken. The new method was comparable in time to deep frying, while according to Sanders, the quality of the chicken was the same as pan-fried. Bingo! So at the age of 50, Sanders completed the development of his secret recipe for frying chicken in a deep fryer, which cooked the chicken faster than a frying pan. Although he never publicly revealed the recipe, he said that the ingredients are salt and pepper and the rest stand on everybody's shelf. When the United States entered World War II, the gasoline supply was limited, and the car tourism that fueled Sanders' roadside business dried up. So Sanders himself was again on the verge of ruin. But after the end of the war in 1950, the governor reappointed Sanders as a Kentucky colonel, and Sanders began to dress accordingly. He grew a goatee and put on a black frock coat and ribbon tie, and from then on called himself Colonel Sanders. A little later, he changed his black frock coat to a snow-white suit, and until the end of his days, he didn't wear anything else in public. For going out, he used a thick woolen suit in winter and a light cotton suit in summer. and he even dyed his mustache and beard to match his gray hair. Sanders hoped that his efforts would pay off and that his Northern Carbon restaurant would continue to be a success indefinitely. But reality intruded relentlessly on his plans. The new interstate was so far away from his gas station, service station, and excellent cafe with divine chicken that traffic fell to almost nothing. Over time, it became simply not profitable for him to maintain this point. Sanders sold his business, or rather what was left of it, at the age of 65. He understood that he was no longer young, but still full of strength and energy. And the prospect of living $105 a month on Social Security didn't please him at all. So Sanders decided that it was time to get serious about franchising his chicken concept. He loaded the car with pressure cookers, a refrigerator of chicken meat and spices, and set off on US roads searching for suitable restaurants. After spending more than 1 month on the road, sleeping in the backseat in his car, Sanders traveled around America. He visited restaurants, offering their owners to cook his signature chicken for employees and customers, and if they liked it, he offered to buy his franchise. I want to say that there were many applicants, but actually, many owners of roadside restaurants were skeptical about innovations. Although the recipe wasn't bad, they didn't see much promise in the chicken, so Sanders often left without any agreement. Once, having reached Utah, he visited his friend Peter Harmon, part-time owner of one of the largest restaurants in South Salt Lake, and offered him his franchise. Thus, in 1952, the first Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise opened. As for the name, they didn't think about it for a long time. It was more of a sign drawn for convenience and clarity by an ordinary artist. Since then, KFC has taken the world by storm and popularized chicken in the fast food industry by challenging the ubiquitous hamburger. Following Harmon's success, several other restaurant owners franchised the concept and paid Sanders 4 cents per chicken. The franchise approach has become quite successful. Although the trip themselves required a lot of Sanders' time, the Colonel Chicken fame ran ahead of him, so potential franchisees eventually began to visit him themselves. Sanders received a patent for his method of frying chicken under pressure and trademarked its finger-looking good. In the early 60s, Dave Thomas, who later founded Wendy Companies, by the way, was working with Sanders on many projects to make KFC more profitable and recognizable. He suggested to the Colonel that they reduce the number of dishes on the menu and focus on the signature dish. And Thomas also gave the idea that Sanders would appear in a KFC commercial in person. As for outdoor advertising, he took the well-known KFC bucket as a basis and turned it into a 3-dimensional sign that rotated in front of almost every American KFC outlet. KFC expanded at a fairly rapid pace and soon became one of the first fast food chains to go international in the mid-60s. So sales outlets were opened in Canada and then in the UK, Australia, Mexico, and Jamaica. By 1963, there were already 600 KFC restaurants, making the company the largest fast food company in the United States. Colonel Sanders has become a prominent figure in the history of American culture. However, the company's rapid expansion stunned the aging Sanders himself. Perhaps he was not ready for such a scale of success and was confused. It's hard to say, but anyway, when he was 70 years old, he sold his offspring to a businessman from Kentucky for $2 million. Instead, he became a hired brand ambassador and partially retained franchise rights in Canada, the UK, Florida, Utah, and Montana. In the mid-60s, Sanders continued to collect royalties from the franchise and his performances. By the beginning of the 70s, the KFC network had 3,000 outlets in 48 countries around the world. If you think that having sold the company, the Colonel calmed down and began to live quietly, you're so wrong. In 1973, Sanders sued the then parent company of Kentucky Fried Chicken for abusing his image by promoting dishes he had no input on. 2 years later, the same parent company unsuccessfully tried to sue Sanders himself for defamation after he publicly called their sauce wallpaper flavor sediment. All Sanders also liked to make surprise visits to KFC restaurants to taste the taste. And if the food disappointed him, he would declare it to the franchisees as a dumb slop or dump the chicken on the floor. All in all, it was fun. But despite all his antics, Colonel Sanders remained the face of the company after its sale, driving 200,000 miles a year and starring in many commercials and television programs. From the mid-60s until his death, Sanders lived in a bungalow in the Lakeview area of Mississauga. Despite the fact that in June 1980 he was diagnosed with acute leukemia, he continued to work and remained as active as before until the very end. On December 16th, at the age of 90, Colonel Sanders died of pneumonia and was buried in his famous white suit and black western tie. At the time of Sanders' death, there were about 6,000 KFC outlets in 48 countries with an annual turnover of $2 billion. Today, KFC is a subsidiary of Yum! Brands, one of the largest restaurant companies in the world. There are more than 25,000 KFC restaurants in over 145 countries and territories around the world. KFC is one of the 100 most valuable brands in the world, and its investors are pretty pleased too. Colonel Sanders, the founder of the company, however, didn't make much money, as at the time of his death in 1980, his net worth was only $3.5 million. Sanders was one of the first to use franchising to expand his business, and today this method is used by thousands of companies worldwide. But not only success in business made Colonel Sanders a legend, his real magic was that he never gave up on his dreams despite all the hardships and obstacles that came his way. As he himself said, one has to remember that every failure can be a stepping stone to something better. Keep up learning, guys. Success is just the number of attempts.